Now, I would request Keshav to speak briefly about India March for Science.
Thank you, Nishad. Hello, everyone. Greeting of the day. Do you know what is science? The understanding of how and why of natural phenomena is science. Why India March for Science? To raise awareness regarding the scientific knowledge, reasoning, thinking, temper, aptitude in the Indian society. With this aim, I, Keshav, PhD scholar from ACSR CSIO Chandigarh, on behalf of India March for Science Chandigarh chapter, I welcome you all to join the webinar on the occasion of India March for Science 2020. Before starting the session, I would like to give a brief introduction about IMFS. India March for Science started in 2017, voicing the demands of the scientists, researchers, students, and public at large with the following demands. First, stop propagation of unscientific, outdated ideas and develop scientific temper, human values, and spirit of inquiry in conformity with Article 51A(h) of the Constitution. Second, allocate at least 10% of central budget and 30% of state budgets to education. Third, ensure that at least 3% of country GDP is used to support scientific and technological research. Fourth, ensure that the education system does not impart ideas that are not based on or contradict scientific evidence. Fifth, ensure that public policies are enacted based on scientific evidence. The scientific community of India continues to press for these demands, whereas the present crisis has yet again reinforced the urgency to these tasks. In this context, IMFS draws attention in particular to the following specific concern. First, the draft Environmental Impact Assessment EIA notification 2020 issued by the Ministry of Environment, Forestry and Climate Change would lead to dilution of existing EIA process at a time when COVID-19 pandemic itself underscored the need of more stringent measures to protect and sustain the environment. Many unscientific ideas and untested remedies for COVID-19 are propagated by some quarters, even by people in the top, both at center and state. In the absence of the contact teaching due to physical distancing requirement, most schools, colleges, and universities have taken recourse to online teaching as the only available option. However, this is creating new digital divide in the country, with the most students not having adequate facilities to absorb such teaching. We implore the government to take emergency measures to improve online connectivity in the country and to consider the possibility of delaying the commencement of academic session to a time when equal learning opportunities are available to all students in India. We, however, stress that online education cannot substitute formal education at any level as the new normal. While certain important and constructive measures have been taken by the state and central governments toward addressing the COVID-19 crisis, lack of the adequate medical facilities, including ventilators, doctors, public health care centers, nurses and health workers, testing kits, and PPE for medical staff, and testing and quarantine facilities have underlined the need for the greater focus on public health funding and for universal healthcare. IMFS lauded the valuable and selfless service of the frontline workers for their timely and effective response to the COVID-19 crisis. We hope that the ongoing efforts in vaccine research across the globe will achieve success as early as is practically possible without any safety compromise and will be within the reach of even the poorest of the poor. On behalf of the scholars mostly who are working or studying in the Chandigarh, the India March for Science Chandigarh chapter is organizing this online webinar with the title Combating the Pandemic of Pseudoscience. With this, I am handing over the program to coordinator Nishat. Thank you.
Nishat, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for noting. Thank you for the overview, Keshav. So today we have Dr. Anindita Bhadra with us. She is the co-chair of Global Young Academy and the founding chair of alumnus of Indian National Young Academy of Science. She is presently working as an associate professor in the Department of Biological Sciences in IISER Kolkata, and she also holds the office of Associated Dean of International Relations and Outreach in the institute. She has completed her PhD from Center of Ecological Sciences, IISc Bangalore, under the guidance of Professor Raghavendra Gadakkar. She has received the INSA Medal for Young Scientist in Animal Sciences in 2009 and SCRB Women Excellence Award in 2013, among other awards and honors. Her research is focused on the areas of animal behavior and ecology. She had worked on the politics of the social wasp Rhopalidia marginata, and presently she is exploring new model system, free-ranging dogs in India. She is also a theater enthusiast and is associated with the theater group Mukhosh. She has accepted our invitation to speak in the webinar titled Combating the Pandemic of Pseudoscience. She will be speaking about the general misconceptions and pseudoscientific beliefs prevalent in our society. So it's over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishad. Very warm welcome to all the attendees of this webinar, and thank you to the organizers from Chandigarh, especially Professor Bera, who invited me to deliver this talk. So before I share my slides, I should say that I have been associated for India March for Science since its inception through the Kolkata chapter and through the Breakthrough Science Society. It's an honor now to be actually connected through this webinar with the Chandigarh chapter, especially through IISER Mohali, where I have a lot of friends. As Keshav has already spoken about the India March for Science, the concept that we are actually part of the bigger March for Science movement, which started worldwide in earlier in 2017, and India kind of joined a bit late, but better late than never. And we got a very good response with marches being organized across the country in almost 40 different cities in the very first year. And what is fantastic about the IMFS movement is that it is not just scientists or research scholars who are out there marching for science, but people from different walks of life who are enthusiastic about science and who think that science is important for our society. They join the march. There are students, there are philosophers, there are journalists, there are people from different professions who join the march and walk alongside us carrying interesting banners and posters. And it's a fantastic experience, actually, to be on the road and walk with so many people, discuss a lot of interesting topics while you walk. And typically, because the march happens at a time in India when you're at a time sweating in the sun and then getting drenched in the rain and then drying in the post rain breeze and then getting drenched all over, it's a very, very interesting life experience. So anyone who's not experienced it yet, I hope we are going to really march on the road again next year and the years to come in the future, because I don't think our struggle to make science a pillar of society is going to end very soon in India, definitely. And I would recommend that everyone join the march, if not to have a statement which you want to put forth, but also just to enjoy the experience, because it's really a life changing experience. I can vouch for that. I've been on this march 3 different times, and every time has been a different experience. We've even taken our children on this march. So it's sad that we could not actually go out on the streets, but I'm glad that IMFS across the country this time has come up with different kinds of virtual programs. In fact, right now the Kolkata chapter's program ended, and now we are starting the Chandigarh chapter. Mumbai has been doing a lot of programs over the last month or so, and I would recommend everyone to not just be here in this webinar, but keep following the pages, keep getting engaged. And it is not just about listening to somebody's viewpoint, it is also about expressing your views and being involved in the process of building the future society for the future generations, and also bringing in the ambience of science in our society. So, with that, I will go straight into what I'm supposed to be talking about today, which is the title of the talk, as already given to you, is Combating the Pandemic of Pseudoscience. And this was a very interesting topic which was suggested because I am someone who is very passionately engaged with combating pseudoscience in many ways. So, as someone who works on science and someone who does a lot of outreach, I try to engage with people. Young people, students in schools, the public, journalists, and we try to work towards this. So, before I say about how we combat pseudoscience, I think it's very important to understand that as scientists, we all have uh, the notion of what the scientific method is. So, if I look into, Keshav very nicely said, what is science? It is how, the exploring the hows and whys of natural phenomena. And for that, what we use is the scientific method. So I like this sentence from Carl Sagan. He has a lot of interesting comments about the scientific method. And he says the method of science is far more important than the findings of science. And this, I think, is something this we don't realize. Often when you talk to lay people, they equate science with a computer or the mobile phone or the television. So science is often kind of equated with gadgets, with major inventions. But science is not just inventions. Science is really the process that one goes through to finally come up with that gadget that you see. A gadget, this phone in my hand, is a lot of science packed into this one thing. Some of it, which when people did it, was considered to be complete garbage, and people would have said, why are you even wasting time and money and effort and energy into this kind of research? Do something else which is important to society. So often we come across this notion of what is useful science. No science is useless. So there is science and there is technology. So that you could say, I do biological research, or I study botany. I am interested in the diversity available in the plant world, or I am interested in understanding why some plants adapt to different environments, some don't. I'm interested in understanding why some plants produce certain toxic substances and some don't. Whereas somebody might say, I don't care, I want to produce more food for society, I want to study agriculture. Fantastic. We need all kinds of people, some who are interested in applied science, some who are interested in what we call blue skies research or basic science. What is basic science today? Question driven science, curiosity driven science, where you seem to think, why are you doing this, what's the use of it? Often people ask me, you study dogs? I mean, you study stray dogs? I mean, why not some useful breeds which out of which you can make money? Why on earth would anybody want to study dogs? Still, I can now tell people, yeah, maybe someday my, at least in grants I write, yeah, whatever I come up with will eventually help us to manage dog populations better or manage dog human conflict better. In my heart, I know that's not why I'm studying dogs. I'm studying dogs because there are interesting questions about dogs and evolution of dogs which I'm interested in, and I'm studying dogs because I like dogs as an animal. But if you want to say this to people, nobody will give you money. This is the unfortunate situation for which we need the March for Science. We need to tell the government, we need to tell the people, see, taxpayers need to pay money for doing basic science, because what is useless today might be useful tomorrow. uh, the entire internet that we are so fascinated about, that is getting us connected today, that is enabling the March for Science virtually today, wouldn't have been possible if somebody was not playing around, or rather playing the fool around, while not doing so-called useful or applied research. So the method of science is what's important, the process of science is what's important, the findings are of course important. You need to publish the findings so that other people know what you found and they start from there, but that is not the ultimate goal of science. Science is hypothesis driven typically, and it asks testable questions that must be falsifiable. This is very important. Science is different from faith or belief. Pl- We scientists don't say, I believe this is true, so it must be true. No, we say, okay, I did an experiment and these are the results. I did some statistics and this is what my tests tell me. So I think this is true. Now, every hypothesis by definition must be falsifiable, and an hypothesis is sacrosanct. There's nothing sacrosanct in science. You have an hypothesis which is a preliminary prediction to a question. You might find an answer tomorrow, somebody might find a better answer or might prove you wrong. That is how science progresses, that is how society progresses through science. As I said, nothing is sacrosanct in science. We have questions leading to answers, opening up more questions, and the saga continues. That is how science continues in society. And we have to remember that the whole is much greater than the sum of its parts. So, this is something which is extremely important to remember. I can give you the analogy of this Aesop's fable. I think all of us have read in some way or the other, of the blind man and the elephant. One guy thinks the elephant looks like a pillar because he happens to feel the leg. Somebody thinks that the elephant looks like a snake because he happens to hold the trunk, so on and so forth. But nobody really gets to the elephant. What you really need is crosstalk, interdisciplinarity in research. You need to put your data together, rack your brains together, and if eventually you need to derive the elephant out of the pieces of data that you have. So you need to sum up the parts, but that's not enough. Just summing up and a snake and a pillar and wings or whatever those four men felt, I've forgotten all the details now. But if you just add them up, you're not going to get an elephant still. You are going to need some imagination, you're going to need some lateral thinking to put this together and finally conjure up the elephant. I love Calvin and Hobbes. You seem to find wisdom in every page you turn. And when I was looking for scientific method, this is what I found in Calvin and Hobbes. So this is, I think, a very nice cartoon for introducing what the scientific method is to a layperson or to children. So as you can see in the cartoon, Calvin says, want to see something weird to Hobbes, and he says, see, I put bread in, push down the lever, and then toast pops up. So Hobbes says, wow, where does the bread go? And Calvin says, beats me. Isn't that weird? So there's an observation and there's a question, where did the bread go? Now you have to come up with the hypothesis and do an experiment to test your hypothesis to come up with the answer. And of course, if I give you a situation like this, depending on what age you belong to and what your learning level is, you might come up with very interesting hypotheses. And all of these should be testable. Some of these would be proven to be wrong. Some of these might be proven to be right. We don't know. So, but the point is, that would be the method of science: observations, question, hypothesis, experiment, results, answer, but more questions, and so on and so forth. So now we come to pseudoscience. This is the Oxford English Dictionary 1989 edition definition of pseudoscience: a pretended or spurious science, a collection of related beliefs about the world mistakenly regarded as being based on scientific method or as having status that scientific truths now have. This has a lot of loaded words in it. Of course, pretended or spurious is very obvious, but then this uh, mistakenly regarded as being based on scientific method. And this is very important in the present day society, because often what you would see is what is being peddled as science turns out to be pseudoscience. And often it is nicely wrapped up in this so-called method of science, which is not really the method of science. And again, I like putting things in cartoons. So here is a cartoon I borrowed from this website kaggle.com, which gives you the scientific method, and in this context the creationist method, but you could replace the creationist word by pseudoscience, it just remains the same. So somebody says, here are the facts, what conclusions can we draw from them? That's how scientists should be speaking. Whereas if you are doing pseudoscience, you will say, here's the conclusion. What facts can we draw to support it? And there you have your pseudoscience. You already have a decision. This is what you need to propagate. You have a propaganda set in place. Now you need a method to wrap this propaganda up in something which looks like science, and you want science or uh, kind of muddled up science to help you to propagate this. And this is another very nice way of representing it. What could be pseudoscience? Alchemy, experimentation, transformation, fallacy, false belief. Add to that tarots, astrology. You add to that whatever, water therapy, uh, homeopathy, all kinds of stuff where you need to believe that there is a cure, or you need to have faith for the healing to happen, or somebody says, because I say this is true, this must be true." All of this is finally pseudoscience. Science will ask you to ask questions. You will always dig deeper and deeper, asking why and how. Pseudoscience will tell you, don't ask questions, take it at face value. Why are we discussing pseudoscience? Because India March for Science, and for that matter, the entire March for Science movement across the world, is trying to combat pseudoscience, which is unfortunately there in various forms in different walks of life across the world. But currently, we are going through a pandemic, and we need to talk about pseudoscience in this very specific context because it's very important. This image, of course, needs no introduction. It's a particle, not even a completely living organism, uh, size of approximately 120 nanometers. You can't even see it. And this is driving the world in a frenzy. Every other day we have news, and every day everybody is looking up how many new cases, how many new deaths, how many recoveries. People are doing models after models to make predictions. Models are failing. Countries are going up and down on their peaks, and their life has, as we know or as we are used to, has pretty much come to a standstill. So, in addition to all the scientific information out there, we are also finding a lot of pseudoscience out there. Let me give you some examples. I'm sure you can come up with many more, and we can discuss that in the Q&A. So this is a headline from one of our well-known newspapers, the New Indian Express. Says citizens rush to homeopathic centers for magic immunity pills. I think we all know there was this rush for some time when a certain homeopathic medicine was touted as to be a sure shot cure, and then no, not cure, but prevention. No, not prevention, but immunity booster against the novel coronavirus. And then there was some confusion. There were protests against this, and then the Ayush Ministry said, no, don't do this. Don't meddle homeopathy and Ayurveda. Don't trust all of this news. This is another news story from our Times of India, which talks about 8 herbs and seeds that can boost your immunity. And if you search immunity boosters on Google, I don't know how many pages you are going to get. And of course, WhatsApp University, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram is full of immunity boosters. And of course, we have companies which are trying to make a lot of money, um, trying to peddle so-called immunity boosters. In addition to all of these, we have the government telling us what to do and what not to do for immunity boosting during the COVID-19. They are talking of Ayurveda and homeopathy. And of course, last but not the least, the latest in the series has been Bhabiji Papar. And this particular piece of news has been put up in a bigger size than everyone else, because this is the news today, because the person you see here, one of our ministers, advertising for the Papar and endorsing it, saying that this is going to help you drive away Corona Bhagao, has been admitted in AIMS today with COVID-19. So we know how well the Papar works. And of course, we have our friend from across the world who has been making all kinds of statements. But this is to tell you how pseudoscience and news of pseudoscience, especially when peddled by people in power and people that a lot of people look up to in the public, can be dangerous. I'm sure all of us know about the situation where President Trump mentioned that the coronavirus is the infection within, and that is what needs to be disinfected. And then there was a surge in people in New York who were drinking bleach to cure the coronavirus, and several people actually died because of this. We have, of course, a similar situation, not so dangerous maybe, but an organic version of this being touted in India as a sure shot protection against coronavirus. And we know how people have been hosting drink parties with this fantastic and stinky organic drink, and not something that I would recommend that you try. And we have situations like this where everybody is advertising COVID cures using homeopathy or using Ayurveda, because there has been endorsement of some kind or the other, and then these have to be flagged and these have to be stopped. So of course, not everybody gets this news, but when there's a lot of propaganda on social media, people start believing in this. So what is the problem if people start believing? No, sometimes people say, I mean, why do you care so much about the pseudoscience? Let it be there on WhatsApp. But this is dangerous, because if you really believe that if you are going to drink haldi wali chai and you don't need medication, if you get corona, you're going to be cured, you might need a ventilator. Whereas maybe a paracetamol would have been good enough for you, or you at least needed to get a test done. No, your haldi wali chai is what you trusted more, and that ended you up in a hospital. This is a situation that we don't want. During the pandemic, when people ignore advice from healthcare professionals, they don't wear a mask because they think they have already taken an immunity booster and they are not going to be affected. It's not only wrong, it's selfish, because they might be carriers, they might be asymptomatic carriers. They think they are fine because there are no symptoms, but might be actually spreading the disease to others and infecting and even killing others. We know all the stories about asymptomatic carriers. There are a large number of people. Actually, there is a news item today which says about 40% of the population are probably asymptomatic carriers, and they carry as much viral load as a symptomatic carrier or a patient. So this is dangerous. Also, because you might be taking a lot of things without even knowing whether it's good for you, bad for you, what it does to your comorbidities, and you might actually fall ill, not because of COVID, but because of something else. Because often these are not tested chemicals. You don't know what it does to your body if you're taking them regularly in a large quantity, because there is no titration of what is a good dosage, what is a bad dosage, what is good for certain health types, etc., etc. So this is why we are worried. This is why spreading of these pseudoscience information is bad for the society, other than the philosophical fact that pseudoscience is pseudoscience. What are scientists doing about it? Scientists are fighting in their own way. I'm going to highlight two such efforts. One is a group of about 500 people who are not only scientists, but scientists, journalists, artists, and generally people enthusiastic about science. We call ourselves the Indian Scientists Response to COVID-19, or the ISRC. This is our website, INDSCI COVID-19. Anybody who's interested, you could go visit the website. There's a lot of information out there for the public, and we have information in different regional languages in addition to in English, where there are mythbusters, hoaxbusters, Q&As. There are stories based on life experiences. There are pieces of voiceovers for people with disabilities. So there are all kinds of information out there, and actually two audio plays which we have done and posted on the ISRC YouTube channel for publicity. So there are also modeling data and a lot of detailed commentaries for people who want to read up on the detail of where we get our information from. And all of this is based on either things posted by WHO, the WHO, or from actual scientific papers. And then there is the TIFR IISc joint initiative, COVID Gyan, which you can access either through the IISc website or the TIFR website, or just type COVID Gyan on Google and you can access the site. They also have multilingual information and very similar kind of approaches, modeling information for the public, some research, and how to keep COVID-19 away. I'm just going to
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
I think
Probably there is some interruption from
With the
Dr.
internet.
Bhadra's side. Okay, no, she is here again. Ma'am, you are muted.
I don't know when I got disconnected, so can you just tell me?
so. You were talking about this TIFR and IISc initiative.
Right.
COVID.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Probably in a few moments.
That's it.
Yeah.
Yes, we can see your screen now.
Okay. Yeah, so I was talking about the TIFR-IS initiative, which is COVID Gyan, which is available again in different languages and has very similar resources to ISRC, but of course, these are similar but different. But the approach is similar, and there are actually a set of people who are common between the two kind of initiatives. So this is mostly for people to disseminate information, to tell people how to stay safe, what to do, what not to do, and of course, showing you some examples from the ISRC website of how we do this myth busting to make it attractive. These are things we share on social media, which is available in different Indian languages. As I said, 14 different languages, I think. And you could go and access it from the website directly and share with people whenever you think relevant. So I'm going to actually stop here, and I will feel better if we can kind of take this forward through a Q&A rather than just me talking.
Okay. So thank you for the presentation. It was really beautiful. So now, if anyone has question who has joined us through Zoom, they can raise your hand through the raise hand option in Zoom, and then you can unmute yourself and ask the questions one by one. Okay. So Anishka, okay. So there is someone. Yes. The username is Dell. So I am unmuting you. Yeah, you can ask. And please switch on your video first.
Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. Can you please switch on your video?
But I can't hear you all.
Okay. Anyways, you can go ahead and ask your question.
She's muted.
Oh. Mute. Yes, you are unmuted now. You can ask your question. Please tell your name and then. Hello.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Can you please introduce yourself and then ask your question?
Good evening, ma'am. Good evening, everyone. Ma'am, my name is Soumya. I'm from ISM Valley. Ma'am, my question is regarding SARS-CoV-19 treatment. I don't know whether should I say it as a pseudoscience or wrong science, but I have come across many situations and readings that doctors are prescribing many antibiotics to treat the SARS-CoV-19. And I know that if a person is infected with SARS-CoV-19, he or she is susceptible to many bacterial infection also. So I think this is creating an antibiotic resistant condition. And after we have combat this SARS-CoV-19, we have no time to sit idle and we have to face this condition that we have to treat the antibiotic resistance conditions also. So is it good that doctors are prescribing so much of antibiotics?
Yeah. So, I think all of us have gone through this in our lives. Every season change in India, we get the viral fever or the flu. And there are some doctors who would give you antibiotics, but we all know, at least if you have studied some biology, you know, that antibiotics are not for viral fever. So, unless your flu has developed into a chest infection or a throat infection, which is bacterial, antibiotics are of no use. So, of course, if somebody is being prescribed antibiotics because the person has a COVID 19 infection, that is wrong. I think we have enough information which shows that COVID 19 infection, when it's mild, paracetamol is the only thing that you need to keep the fever under control. Only the problem with COVID 19 is sometimes in many people, it's progressing towards a pneumonia when people need ventilator, or sometimes, which is the worst case scenario, for which I don't think in India we have too much data, but US is showing that another big problem with COVID-19 is that people are developing random blood clots, which are affecting the heart, brain, liver, kidney, sorry, not liver, heart, brain, lungs, and kidneys, which is of course a problem. And there have been reports of completely unexplainable strokes and heart attacks when people have then undergone, when they have been autopsied the bodies, then doctors have found blood clots. So this is something that nobody is really talking of much in India, but I'm actually hearing from some medical friends that when people are getting admitted to the hospitals with COVID-19, they are often being also given blood thinners. So obviously doctors are aware of it, but that the clot is happening, so they are giving blood thinners, especially to patients with comorbidities like heart disease or kidney disease. But antibiotics are not explainable unless somebody has developed a secondary infection of some kind. I don't see why that person should be given antibiotics, because overdose of antibiotics is a standard problem. And I think this is a problem which is a major problem in India. I have had arguments with doctors when I had a small child, where doctors would want to prescribe antibiotics for a basic fever and cold. And I would say, why will I give him antibiotics? He only has a cold. So this is a problem. I think this is a major problem. I don't know how to combat this, but it's definitely not right.
So Soumya, do you have any other questions? You can ask them.
Thank you so much. I had this one. Thank you so much.
So we have any other questions from the Zoom participants?
Nishad, maybe if you allow me, can I ask one question?
Definitely.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Anindita, for this wonderful talk. This is the first time I see such a nice way you brought in this interesting topic, actually. So see, normally pseudoscience is there almost all over the globe. But like in India, we see whenever there is a question of pseudoscience, something is being propagated, there is quite a large number of Indian scientists, they even come forward and justify it. But while, let's say in US also they have, let's say, this flat earth community, but we hardly see that any scientific community or some scientists coming forward and actually, how do you say, make some statement supporting it or even to justify it. So there is of course, pseudoscience is there, but we also see that the participation of the scientist in propagating this pseudoscience actually differ quite a bit. So why we see in India such a situation where scientists are already somehow, they still believe in pseudoscience. They still not.
You're going to you're going to open up a Pandora's box, because this is something that I keep talking about in other places. So in other countries also, I have come across, for example, scientists who are deeply religious, who believe in praying when there's something going wrong, or religious other religious practices. But this is something they consider to be a very personal thing. But in India, I think we also we have this issue of um, mi- mingling the personal with what is an open practice. That's one thing. Secondly, whether somebody in America or in a advanced European country is doing it or not, that doesn't justify whether it's right or wrong. For me personally, as a scientist, I believe in scientific methods. That is what I practice. So I think across the globe we have this problem. In India, we specifically have this problem, that what I call 9 to 5 scientists. That doesn't mean they work 9 to 5 for science. What I mean is scientists who take science as a profession, not as a way of life. And this is where the scientific temper, which is there in our constitution, is missing from our society. We do not follow the methods of science in our personal lives. We think science is what I do. I will be very objective in my science. But then don't ask me why I am going to do Bhumi Puja for building my house. I always say, excuse me, if you are a scientist, I mean, I have seen scientists who follow Vastu for choosing where to build their house, or they wear 3 stones on their fingers to, combat all whatever things that the planets can do to their lives. Or even worse, they match horoscopes to get their sons and daughters married. Why? If you are a scientist, you should be a scientist in practice, not just as a professional. So, if you are not objective in your life, if you actually can accept that planets which are light years away, which have nothing to do with your birth and death, can actually influence the day to day happenings in your life, and a tiny stone on a finger can actually combat that, then where is your objectivity, and why will I even trust your science? Because you cannot be objective in half of your brain and subjective in the other half of your brain. From the morning to the evening, you cannot go from being objective to subjective to objective to subjective. That's not, I mean, are you a schizophrenic or something? Either you're an objective person or you're not. If you are an objective person, how can you be wearing stones to combat the evil from the planets? If you're a scientist and you really believe that the alignment of the planets at the exact muhurt of your birth are going to, determine your life, you should just, why don't you just stop and wear 50 rings on and just do nothing else? Everything will just happen on their own. And then you will say, no, no, but there is karma. You are basically wearing all of those stuff to deviate your karma. And then you say, but there is karma still. Where is your objectivity? What is a horoscope? Nowadays, apparently, you can put in some numbers and you can get computerized horoscopes. I can make you 50 horoscopes in 1 hour if I want. And then I call it okay. And I call myself a scientist. Sorry. I've seen people, when I tell them this, they say, oh, but do you know there's this scientist in the West and that scientist in the West who also believes in religion? So what? I don't have to look to the West to be objective. I don't have to look to the West to say this is right and this is wrong. What I think is right or wrong is right or wrong. So it's like black is black and white is white. I don't want a Western scientist to come and tell me, no, black is black and white is white. So personally, I feel if I am a scientist, I am a scientist. And I cannot be a scientist by profession, but I think it's okay to do puja and havan and bhumi puja and vastu and rings and astrology and everything else in my personal life, because that's my personal life. I can do as much pseudoscience I like in my personal life. I can have as many immunity boosters as I want in my personal life, but then I come in a webinar and say, but believe in science. I'm sorry, I am a hypocrite in that case.
Mhm. Okay, okay. Thank you very much. But one thing I want to add to this question, Nishad, can I?
Yes, yes.
So essentially what it indicates, see, all these scientists, let's say the picture we have in India. So all these scientists are essentially the product of our education system. So of course, they have been taught science in their schools, then colleges, in the universities, or even in their research training period, right? So even after that, they still endorse or some way kind of, many of them are confused, many of them just based on their belief, they actually go for the pseudoscience and so on. Even they come
Or based
forward
on their
and
politics.
yes, also there could be some petty interest or some agendas too. But my point is, does not it indicate that even in our science education, whatever we say to be science, like how science should be taught, so that it brings up this thinking faculty of mind and etc., logical faculty of mind. Don't you think that there are some issues, serious issues we are
Absolutely.
having? And
Huge issues. A science textbook that my daughter has in class 4. Now they have environmental science, of course, EVS, which has replaced science and history and geography and everything. It's a complete mess. But whatever, textbook, a chapter, the first chapter, which is the first so-called science chapter, starts with our world is beautiful and God made it beautiful. I really freaked out seeing that. I mean, I cannot teach my daughter that from a text which begins like that. I refuse to. And I told her, don't have to read the first 2 lines, forget it. Read from after that. These are the textbooks we are writing. These are scientists writing. Also, I think the way this education goes, again, there's a big divide. Education is still mugging, writing exams, getting a lot of marks. Whenever we interview people, we see whether the student can answer questions. We don't interview people based on how much they understand. We don't care how much they know. We actually care about how much they don't know. And that is where it's wrong. The entire system is wrong. We are not paying attention to asking questions. I have seen my kids being told in class, please don't disrupt the class and ask questions. a teacher is supposed to encourage kids to ask questions. We go through the Gurukul system of education in which you should just take the teacher's statements at face value. It's right because the teacher says so. It's right because it's in a book. It takes a lot of effort to undo this. I'm sure you have gone through this experience in IISER Mohali too. In IISER Kolkata, I'll tell you my first year, first semester experience. I was teaching biology 101. And the first day in class, I am supposed to teach an introduction to organismal biology and evolution kind of stuff. So I go and tell them that, biology is vast, and 50% of the students who come to IISERs do not have bio in part +2. 50% have. So there is a huge divide in the class because half the class thinks this is too kiddish for us. All of this we have done in class 11, and the half the class thinks, oh, this is bio. I dropped bio because I hated it because of all the mugging, and now I have to do it all over again. So how do you take along 200 kids, half of whom hate bio and half of whom already think they know whatever is there in the syllabus, so they don't need to attend class? So I told them, okay, what we are going to do is every day I'm going to ask you to ask me questions, and your question needs to begin with a why and has to be something to do with biology. And together we are going to have discussions and we are going to address these questions. And I said, okay, next class, come with your questions. So the next day I go, I ask them questions, and I get 200 blank looks. And now I go completely blank. I'm like, I don't have slides. I haven't prepared anything because I've gone to class to teach them based on their questions. And I said, yeah, please ask your questions. Nobody has a question. And then I said, guys, I'm serious. Please ask questions. Otherwise, I cannot teach. Nobody asked questions. I said, okay, fine, I cannot teach. And I start walking out of the class. Then somebody says, ma'am. I said, yeah, I have a question. Good. And then it starts, and then we go through the class, we overshoot the class limit, and I said, okay, next class we'll come back. Then they are telling me, we didn't believe you. You really wanted us to ask questions? Because until date, everybody has told us, don't ask questions. And that's how we are teaching science. And we expect these people to be reasoning, logical individuals who are going to be objective in life and really believe in the methods of science. I'm sorry, no.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
That was a wonderful explanation. So now we have a question from Shomo. So Shomo, you can unmute yourself and ask, introduce, and then ask your question. Shomo, can you switch on your video, please? Shomo, can you hear us? Yes. You are not audible.
Maybe just unplug your microphone.
Yes.
And just speak. Sometimes that works. Or you could type your question, Shomo.
Yes, that will also do. He's trying.
Or meanwhile, if someone else has some question, also can place. Huh? And also, there may be some questions coming from Facebook.
Exactly. So, Shourabh, do we have questions from Facebook? You can unmute yourself and then ask.
So am I audible now?
Yes, you are.
Yes.
Okay, so hi, I'm Saurav. I'm a fifth year student from Aisamuhali, and I shall be picking up questions from Facebook. So as far as I can see, there has been two questions appeared on the Facebook. First one asked by Angsuman H. The question is, what is the antidote to the pandemic being discussed here when it is being pushed by people in national position of power?
Public. That is why you need to join the March for Science, and more people need to know about it. Come out on the streets, protest on social media, and not on one day of the year, but every day of the year if possible. We need more and more people who who really think science is important to speak up for science. So of course there are going to be people in power who will peddle pseudoscience at certain times, but if the majority, if the public opinion is against it, if more and more people are working towards developing scientific temper in society, then we are going to win.
Right. So there is another question asked by Anshuman H again. So he says that here the science still is a profession and a stream of education. So it's not an interrogative in sense, but I think he is talking about how the scientific temper can be propagated in society, other than
So,
being.
what I can do in my private capacity, I try to do is I go and talk to as many school kids as I can. Because I think very early in life, these prejudices get ingrained in our heads, and they remain with most people for the rest of their lives. It's very difficult to get people to come out of their, box thinking once they have been filled with prejudices. And very early in our life, prejudices develop, and very few people are able to actually then evolve and become more reasoning individuals. So my way of combating this personally is to talk to kids. At a personal level, I can only talk to maybe 500,000 kids a year, not more. And this is exactly why I tell especially students of science, not just this is not something, you become a faculty and you become responsible and then only you go and do outreach. In fact, what I wanted to do this year, I could not start because of the pandemic, but this is something I want to do, and I would recommend that every institution does this. Every student coming to institutions like ISERS studying science, you should consider it your responsibility to at least go back to your own school, talk to your juniors, tell them about doing science, tell them about careers in science, tell them about the importance of doing science. And the point is, not everybody has to be a scientist. I often come across people who say we should target undergrads because they have already been motivated, they are going to then become our PhD students. They're already motivated, they're studying science. Why do you want them to motivate to study more science? They'll study, and if they have prejudices, they'll not change. Go talk to 10-year-olds. Motivate them to study science, not because everybody has to study science as a profession later, but they have to develop the scientific temper. Motivate them to look around themselves and ask questions about simple things. Why are butterflies colorful and moths not? You don't need to be a scientist to ask this question. Kids ask wonderful questions. Answered their questions, they will be motivated to ask more questions. And this is what we need. We need scientific temper. Go talk to kids who are 8-year-old, 9-year-old, 10-year-old. That is the age group we should target, not the ones who are preparing for joint entrance and IITs and they are already in that. I'm not saying don't talk to them, please do. But they are already in a stream of thought. They have already picked science and come to +2 science, and now they are preparing for higher education. I'm saying go catch them early, go stop their brains from being washed with all the nonsense of pseudoscience. Only then we will eventually have a society where we have scientific temper. We have to remember that at home, at school, at the playground, there is a lot of prejudice, superstition, pseudoscience that the kids are facing. And we are a handful of people who are trying to fight against it. If we don't join hands, if we don't put in more effort, just doing webinars or talking to each other doesn't help. We have to talk to them. We have to motivate people. I often say, tell kids to go talk to their parents and tell them what fun science is. And if I personally think if I talk to 100 kids and even one of them eventually take up science as a career, I have done a bit for society. And each of us need to do it. And it is you who are studying science, it is your responsibility to do this. Doing outreach is not something you do for your CV. Please understand, those of you who are getting fellowship, those of you who are studying in institutions supported by the government, all of us who are getting funding for doing research, we are being paid for by society. It is our responsibility to the society to take our science back to them. If you are doing research, you should be able to explain what you do to the person who sells potatoes to you, to a 10-year-old kid. Only then you are a successful scientist, otherwise not. No matter how many sciences and natures you publish, you are unsuccessful as a scientist as far as society is concerned if your science does not reach them. And science reaches society as knowledge, not just as gadgets. And this is what we have to remember.
So Shomo couldn't join the audio, but he has sent the question, and which is in sync with, in line with the discussion you just told us. He's asking that how to build scientific temperament among school students who are inclined to unscientific practices provoked by their elder member of the family.
See, it depends on what kind of kids you're interacting with. So often showing things hands-on, telling them, oh, you ask a question and I'll help you find the answer rather than give you the answer from a textbook. So what I have seen is it takes some time to break that barrier. But if you can keep interacting, if you can motivate them to, once they trust that if they ask a question, you're not going to laugh at them. Once they trust that you are going to help them find an answer, they're going to open up. Try doing this to a class full of kids. It's immense fun. I often have had experiences where I go to a school to do a 1 hour long talk, and it becomes a 3 hour long interaction because their questions never stop. And I never try to give them complicated science. I try to talk to them about stories, about interesting stories from scientists' lives. And very often I basically tell them, okay, look around yourself and ask me a question, let's see if we know the answer. And I often get other kids to answer their questions and starting a discussion. So of course it takes time, it doesn't happen overnight, but and not 100% of them are going to believe you or become transformed, but you have to keep trying. We have to remember, we have centuries of baggage and we are not going to shed it off very easily, but that doesn't mean we are not going to start.
Yes, so now we have a question from Ritam. Ritam, you can unmute yourself and ask the question.
Yeah. Hi, am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So my question is along the same lines, but it's more targeted towards elders, our parents, relatives who we interact with every day. The number of them falling prey to pseudoscientific propaganda is increasing every day. So how can we get our point across to them, someone who believes strongly in otherwise?
Okay. Ritam, you forgot
to...
Okay.
So what I have seen is for elderly people, you're telling them, this is nonsense, doesn't work. So you need to spend a little time, try and explain to them, not saying this is nonsense, but trying to give them the reason why you think this is not going to work. sometimes what I do is, there are people who find solace in religious ceremonies and stuff, and I never tell them, don't go to a temple, don't do puja. I tell them I will not do it because I don't believe in all of this. You want to do this mumbo jumbo, go ahead and do it. Don't ask me to do it, please. There I say no. But when it comes to stupid WhatsApp messages being forwarded to me by my mother, I immediately reply back saying, please don't do this. This is wrong. And this is why this is wrong. So it doesn't again happen overnight. Even, in this ISRC group, people keep talking about, oh my God, what do we do with family? They keep sending these messages. And at times it's very frustrating, you are doing all of these posters and live talk shows and chats and this and that, making videos, doing Mythbusters and Hoaxbusters, and then your aunt sends you a message giving exactly the same hoax that you've been trying to bust. What do? You send them the Hoaxbuster and say, this is what scientists feel. And you hope that, your flow of Hoaxbusters and Mythbusters are eventually going to increase and combat the flow of the non-science and pseudoscience, which is coming through WhatsApp University. So different sections of people need to be handled in different ways. Depending on your relationships with them, you also need to decide how stern you can be with them. That is going to be at a personal people management level.
Thank you. So now I have a question from Kala Pradeep. She is a BSMS student in ISER Mohali. So she asks, why are scientists in particular and academia in general a gated community, at least in India? Isn't this disconnect between scientists and society more or less responsible for the prevalence of pseudoscience in society, despite the progress made in the paradigm?
Absolutely. And this is exactly what I was trying to say. Scientists need to realize it's their responsibility to communicate with society. We have somehow been in this mode for a long time that scientists don't talk to journalists don't cover science. So there has been this disconnect, and it's not the scientists alone who have been responsible. Of course scientists have been responsible, but also the media. But the good news is there's a lot of science communication happening. There are more and more newspapers covering research from India, because otherwise it used to be something published in the Guardian last week comes into the Statesman this week, and that was all the science news we used to get. But there are more and more reports of science in the media. Mainstream newspapers are reporting science, and then we have Nature India, we have Research Matters, such portals who are doing a lot of science news and science reporting. I think here is again something that students need to do. Some of the students need to take up science communication as a profession, where they can act as the bridge between science and society much better than a journalist who is not trained in scientific method, who needs to understand a paper and write about it, and then there is a disconnect again. So science communication has not been considered to be a serious career in India until recently, and this has been a problem. But I think faculty need to promote this among students as a possible career option. Students need to consider this as a possible career option. There are a lot of workshops which are being conducted by India Bioscience, by NCBS, by ISER Pune, by Research Matters. And if people take up, more and more science students take up science journalism, science communication becomes a very efficient and lucrative field for people to engage in, and future scientists open up to science communication, this disconnect between society is going to reduce.
Thank you. So, Manavda, there is a question from Facebook, you say. Can you ask the question here?
Saurabh is disconnected.
Okay. Anishika, if you will.
Okay, so let me read for Mayuk. Okay, yeah. So Mayuk asks that there are many unscientific practices, like people think that if a cat crosses their road, that is an ominous sign. How can one convince people without formal education in science that there is no correlation between an animal crossing the road and something bad happening to them? some other time and other place. Yeah. This is the
Yeah,
question.
so one of the things is to actually demonstrate that, you know, the cat crossed the road and I crossed the road and I'm alive, and I keep doing it routinely. Others will see me and start doing it eventually. And of course, talk to people, try to reason with them that why do you think this is true? Can you give me one possible explanation for this that you think is true? And you give them the scientific explanation of why it is not true. This is exactly like I said, you know, how can somebody believe that wherever the planets were in the sky when they were born, and whoever even knows the exact minute and second an individual was born and what is being born, you know, somebody cut open your mother's tummy and took you out, that is being born, or you actually came out through the birth canal, that is being born. So if being born is changed by definition, what happens to the planets? So you know, and you have to basically be patient and give a scientific explanation to show that whatever you are saying is not true, and this cannot be true. Is not true is one thing, but you need to explain why this cannot be true. In trying to be scientific, you cannot tell a person, I am a scientist, believe me. Then you are as bad as a religious leader. You have to give the scientific explanation to say, this is why this cannot be true. If you still want to believe in it, knowing that this is untrue, I cannot help it. But please don't at least believe in it knowing that this is true, because I'm giving you, I'm falsifying your hypothesis, right? That is what it's all about.
That answers.
Thank you.
So I got a few questions while participants filled up their forms, but I don't see them here now. So I'll ask the questions on behalf of the participants. So there is a question from Antarik Mojumdar, who asked, how does the fake news of various vaccines being invented by various universities affect mental health and expectation?
So I think there is some problem with the internet.
Yeah, I
from
think
Anandita's
there is
end.
some.
But this is one of the things we must learn from this, that given this internet situation, we are
Yes.
pushing ourselves towards online education. Think
Yes.
about this, how it's going to affect the common people living in the rural areas and so on.
Sorry, I got disconnected again.
Yes, please. I think Nishat, you have to repeat the question.
Yeah, I will repeat the question. Antarik Mujumdar asks, how does the fake news of various vaccines being invented by various universities affect mental health and expectations? I mean,
I think it's very important because, you know, um, people should understand this, that you know, everybody is stressed, everybody wants a vaccine, and then there is this news there is a vaccine and people are overjoyed, and then 2 days later you know that there isn't one. So, you know, actually whenever people were telling me vaccine is going to come in 15 days, I was telling them, no, please don't believe, this is not going to work. So person to person, I was telling people this is not going to work because the vaccines take their own time and there are science behind this. Even now that we are getting a vaccine, I think we are getting it too fast, and no, everybody hopes it's going to work, but we, of course, we don't know if it's going to work. So yes, this is a very important factor which I'm sorry to see that nobody really thinks about, because people are already stressed out through the lockdown. There are you know, some of us are stressed out through online education and stuff, but there are, we have to think the economy is in a bad shape, people are losing jobs, markets are crashing, so there is a lot of stress out there. And something which people are hoping for, they, it raises their hopes and again brings them down. That is definitely a stress on people's well-being, and this is something as a society we need to combat, because people might be making money out of this, but as a society, people are actually suffering, and it's a really nasty thing to do.
Okay, so do we have any other question from the participants in Zoom? Okay, Anishika, do we have questions from Facebook?
Currently, I don't have, but Anushka Chakraborty asks that she wants to ask some question on behalf of Antari.
Okay, she can unmute herself. Anushka, you can unmute yourself. And please introduce yourself before asking the question.
Anushka, if you are speaking, we can't hear you.
If you are unable to join us here, you can also write in the chat box.
Nishat, can I ask a question?
Definitely. Can you just introduce yourself, Shubhodip?
Yeah. I'm Shubhodip. I'm doing postdoc in University of Zagreb. It's a wonderful talk. Uh, I really enjoyed it. I would like to ask a question which is directly not linked with pseudoscience, but with COVID vaccine and treatment. Uh, what we are seeing that the vaccine will be late coming to the market if it is followed in proper scientific methods of development. So lot of people, actually I have heard from doctors from India and abroad that only way to survive is herd immunity or population immunity. Can you shed some light on it?
Okay.
Thank you.
So the idea of herd immunity is that about 60% of the population is already infected, and you can look up mathematical models. The idea is, if the majority of the population has been infected and have been cured, then your chance of randomly, suppose you are yet uninfected, your chance of randomly encountering an infected person goes down, right? So as more and more people get infected and cured and become so-called immune, then the transmission rates are going to go down because of the simple fact of, imagine Brownian motion, and everybody is moving in Brownian motion, and then particles come in contact with each other randomly. So more the number of people with immunity, your chance of randomly encountering a person who can infect you goes down, and that is how eventually the population gets immune. So the number that we know that is required for herd immunity through simulations is approximately 60%, which, by the way, remember, in a country of 130 crores is huge. Right now, the numbers, at least the official numbers which we are seeing, are like going from 60,000, 65,000, and we are panicking. We are still in lockdown, lock, whatever you call it. Life is not back to normal. Imagine what it would require to achieve herd immunity in a country like India. Okay, so in theory, herd immunity is what you want to achieve. So what vaccines are going to do is make you immune even without you getting the disease. So give the herd immunity to you without actually spreading the infection. We have to keep a few things in mind. I'm going to play devil's advocate here. Of course, I'm not a virologist, I'm not a medical person. I'm just speaking from a logical point of view as a biologist. I'm a bit concerned because the vaccine, from the paper which was published about the success of the vaccine, what I could see is it has been tested on people in the age group of 18 to 55 without any comorbidities. Remember, people really being affected and dying in this disease are ones above 60, ones below 10. So the really seriously affected part of the population has not been tested for the vaccine. Second kind of people who are really getting affected by this disease, who are dying in large numbers, are people with comorbidities, people with heart disease, lung disease, kidney disease. They have not been tested for the vaccine because of obvious reasons. Vaccines go through different levels of testing, and these have not happened. So the vaccine has been certified based on testing on our quote unquote normal population. Whether I will feel safe to give it to my 8-year-old daughter, I don't know. Whether I will feel safe to give it to my 70-year-old father, I am not sure. So, if there are issues, we will only know eventually. So, I am going to take this with a pinch of salt. Second major concern, which I have again, based on simple logic and nothing else, is there was a study published from Italy. I've forgotten which journal, probably the Lancet again, but we have to check. But this was a large population study with a huge sample size on COVID affected patients in Italy. So what they found was that the patients, when they recovered from COVID-19, they were all testing positive for the presence of antibodies. Excellent. When the same set of people were tested some 3 to 4 weeks later, I've forgotten the exact time frame, but approximately that amount of time later, several of them, a large chunk of this population, had no antibodies, which means for a large part of the population, antibodies develop but don't sustain. Vaccines work by the philosophy of giving you a little bit of infection to help you develop antibodies. If antibodies vanish after a month, imagine what we are heading towards even with the vaccine. Are we going to get multiple booster doses? I again read a report which said one booster dose should help the antibodies to sustain. Again, we don't know until and unless we test it. First, we need the vaccine, then we need the booster dose, then we need to see how long the antibodies remain. So there are actually a lot of open questions. And as I said, herd immunity is easier said than done. When you have 60% of a large population required to be exposed to the disease, to be infected, and to be recovered, then of course, even if mortality is 1%, that is a huge, huge number. And you don't want any of your close kin to face that. So it's a problem. Though in principle, herd immunity is what we want to attain, I don't think on ethical grounds or humanitarian grounds or moral grounds, whatever you call it, we can actually say, let some people die, we will attain herd immunity.
Thank you for your answer. So there is this question from Anushka Chakraborty. She asks, ma'am, may I get some information regarding black magic practices in India? How a country is lagging behind due to the bubble of black magic?
Well, I don't have information regarding black magic, but yes, of course, we read it in the news that people practice black magic, and you have to understand, no matter what we say in terms of numbers, education in its proper sense is yet to reach the masses of the country. Of course, we have increased literacy. Increased literacy means one school in an area with 5 villages with one master and kids who come to the school for the midday meal, and they can eventually sign their names on their whatever forms. That is the kind of literacy that we have attained in all of these years, and that is what we are continuing. Actually, another big topic of discussion in this year's March for Science has been this entire problem that we are facing with online education. Even the little bit of education that was percolating to the masses has been completely stopped now because of the online mode of education, where people don't have internet, people don't have gadgets, where teachers don't have internet and gadgets, and we are saying we are going to do education online. It just doesn't work. It doesn't even work for us. So forget about where people don't have gadgets and internet. We have created haves and have nots for education. So where you don't have basic education, see, you have to also understand the social evolution, cultural evolution of humankind. Why did humans invent God to begin with? Because you wanted to believe that there's somebody up there who's going to take care of me when there are a lot of uncertainties. So when there are a lot of uncertainties in life which you don't have control on, often people resort to faith, to black magic, to superstition. You just want things to get right, and you are ready to do anything or believe in anything for things to get right. So this is where superstitions come in, and this is where people make use of public sentiment to propagate pseudoscience and non-science and superstition. So of course it's there. We also have to understand that it's all very nice to sit in my cozy room and talk about the problem of black magic. We also have to identify why there is still black magic and how do we combat the why part of it. Because you and I can go and tell people in a remote village in Chhattisgarh that, black magic is very bad and, this is what science tells you. But when this person has no money to feed his family and no money to get his daughter's dowry, and the daughter is going to be killed, and he does not know what to do about it, in a society like this, how do you not let black magic propagate? That is the easiest way out. Superstitions, faith healing, and things like that will propagate. You don't have money. You believe in a faith healer whom you give a bag of potatoes and he'll come and do something. You don't have a doctor. The nearest hospital is 50 kilometers away, and there is a snake bite. You believe in a faith healer and nothing happens, but at least you tell yourself, I tried my best, right? So it's not enough to say that we are going to do outreach, but we have to demand better education system, better healthcare system, better sanitation system from the government. If people don't have the basic necessities of a decent human life, forget a good life, a decent life where they can live with dignity, people are going to resort to all of this, and there's no way you can combat it with science and logic, because that is basic human nature, to have something to hold on to. And when you don't have anything, then it helps. Are we stuck again?
Yeah, I think Nishat's
Yeah,
internet
okay.
is
I'm
problem.
not stuck.
So this is just to say, see, this is how is our internet connection. Even Nishat
Yeah,
is
and
in
we are
the
trying to do online teaching for a whole semester with this. And this is with good internet connection. Forget about people with bad internet connection.
Correct. This is what it is. Nishat, are you there? Can you hear us?
Yes.
Yes, I just got disconnected. Sorry. Okay. So now we know why online
Why it
education
doesn't
can
work.
Uh, so we have another question from Shomo, who actually asks that homeopathy is a pseudoscience. We agree there, but it still has a large success rate. And how do we stop this kind of thing then?
See, this is like, we have people around us who staunchly believe in homeopathy because there are no side effects. I was actually, when I was looking up this cartoons for pseudoscience, I found a lovely one where the doctor is saying that, of course, there are no side effects in homeopathy because there is no medication in it. So it's interesting. There was recently somebody circulated a paper where they were actually trying to show that the dilution that homeopathy practices actually works. Point is, being a scientist, I think we also need to be open to the other explanation. If somebody can do a test in the lab and show that this works, I will accept it. But give me a decent sample size, give me a population wide study, different age groups, different ailments. Don't say I need your entire family history for 3 generations before I can give you a medicine which will work for you, but will not work for your daughter, by the way. There I have a problem. I mean, you give me a formula, then. Don't tell me, oh, it's all experience. You will not understand this. If you can give me a formula by which I can say, okay, if I put in A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H parameters and I run this simulation, I'm going to get this, I will still accept it. So this is exactly like I said, why does it still work? Why does astrology work? I mean, homeopathy, forget it. I will take arsenic alp 10 times a day if you ask me to. If you give it to me in globules, they taste okay, fine, big deal. But people wear rings. People spend thousands of rupees on this horrible looking stuff which they're ready to wear on different parts of their body to combat something which is happening millions of light years away. I mean, excuse me, what are you talking about? Homeopathic is something at least you can touch and feel and eat. If that works, then why not homeopathy? Works. I mean, tomorrow I will go out on the street and say I can talk to dogs. Believe me, because I am a dog expert. It'll work. A lot of people will be happy to believe me. But the point is, I won't. But somebody who's a quack will. There's the difference. How do you combat it? With science. You go to the lab, test it and show it doesn't work, or test it and show it works. If you are very, if you feel strongly about it, you should feel strongly enough to go to the experiment and prove it by the methods of science.
So we have another question from Kala. So she asks, why do we have homeopathic Unani hospitals taking in students from All India medical exam? Isn't these placebo pseudoscience practices normalized by the government itself?
Of course it is. And that is why in the March for Science, we demand that it stops. See, all the more reason why we need March for Science.
Okay.
We have a Ministry of Ayush. What are you talking about?
Yes. And probably in the new education policy, they have new regulations from the Ministry of Ayush for the students who will be taking medical as their subject in graduation.
Yes.
Okay. So do we have any other questions? Probably not. So thank you, Dr. Bhadro, for this lively discussion. And thank you so much. And we thank you from the Chandigarh March for Science organization. And this is not only one webinar we have organized. We organize a series of programs offline, but now we also will start to organize programs online as well. So stay connected to our Facebook page and you will get to know more. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. Nice questions from all of you.
Thank you, Anamita. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Good night.
My pleasure.
Manavra.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.